Hey everyone, it's Eddie Kalegi reminding you that each and every episode of Sports Speak is powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a one-stop shop for tickets to concerts, sporting events, and so much more. And now you can use the promo code SportsSpeak on the site to get $20 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? SeatGeek. Let there be live. And now on to the show. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to another edition of Sports Speak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase. Episode 166. We're in the month of March. Eddie Kalegi here. Tim Moore, busy weekend covering Apple Core hockey. So Rahill Jaiswal pinch hitting. And we have a lot to talk about across the sports landscape. The NFL season is now a month in the rearview mirror, but that means the franchise tagging window has passed and some free agency rumors have begun. We'll delve into all of that. Major League Baseball free agency is still ongoing, and the Dodgers and Padres play a regular season game in 12 days. We'll talk about the implications of that. And the NBA season now, just about a month until the postseason kicks off. Who are the contenders and who are the pretenders in both conferences? We'll dive into that as well. But let's start with the biggest story in the NFL world this week. Russell Wilson, after being acquired by the Denver Broncos in a lucrative deal where they sent picks, they sent established NFL talent to Seattle. They trade for Russell Wilson, have a disastrous first year with Nathaniel Hackett, fire Hackett, bring in Sean Payton, get off to a good start this season, and then crumble at the end. And Russell Wilson released by the Denver Broncos. At least they will be doing that when the free agency window opens, according to reports. And that will leave them with $85 million in dead cap. And Raheem, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Russell Wilson being traded to the Broncos, Denver's move there might be the worst trade now in NFL history.
Yeah, if it's not, it's definitely up there. Um, I'm trying to rack my brain to think of the only maybe trade I can think of on that level would be the DeAndre Hopkins trade to Arizona. Um, but yeah, no, this is definitely up there. The Denver Broncos, I mean, just an absolute failure from top to bottom. Now, it's not all on Russell Wilson. We do have to acknowledge that because they did him no favors whatsoever. You talked about they hired Nathaniel Hackett thinking they were going to get Aaron Rodgers because they worked together in Green Bay. Rodgers decides to go back to Green Bay at the time. So then they trade for Russell Wilson. And you could just tell from the beginning, Hackett really had no idea what he was doing. He's a great offensive mind, but he's just not suited to be a head coach. You can tell from the opening game of the season with his clock management, his play calling. It was just a disaster from the start, and really, it was almost doomed to fail. Then you bring in Sean Payton, and Russell Wilson honestly didn't have a bad year, but you can tell Sean Payton was never a fan of Russell Wilson. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think he did a good job getting rid of all his concessions. And where remember when he first got traded, they're like, "We're going to give you your own office and all that stuff." But you could tell that Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, Sean Payton never really liked Russell Wilson from the start. The way he tried to run things, it did not work. They got that nice win streak when he played well. But Eddie, you could tell from the way their sideline interactions were when he completely chewed him out in front of the whole world to see that he just wasn't a fan of kind of Russell Wilson's demeanor, and the personalities never meshed. So really just a failure for the Broncos organization. And I mean, you've got a feel from them. They got some of the most passionate fans in the NFL. There's so much lucrative history, NFL history with that franchise, with John Elway, then Peyton Manning coming in. You've got all this kind of great past with their, Von Miller, other great players that have come in there. And just kind of to see them completely fall on their faces the last 2 years, really, really tough. And now they have to deal with it, eating $85 million in dead cap. And they still are going to pay Russell Wilson $39 to $40 million. So it's not like they're completely rid of him cap situation wise. They're still really strapped. So we're going to see where they go from there. I guess they hop on the carousel again or they go through the draft. I really don't know.
Yeah, and that's why, because in terms of calling it the worst trade, with DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals, at least A, they didn't owe him $85 million. They owed him money, not to that level. And B, at least that team made the playoffs. I know the Cardinals fold every year when they were good. They start off good in September and October and fall apart, but at least they played postseason football. with DeAndre Hopkins on their roster. Russell Wilson got the Broncos nowhere. And again, you can't fault him completely. The Sean Payton Russell Wilson combination clearly didn't work out, and they clearly didn't see eye to eye. And now that leads to this question: where does Russell Wilson go from here? Because a lot of eyes are pointing towards the Pittsburgh Steelers, who might be looking at a pivot point away from Kenny Pickett. My question, too, is really how much does Russell Wilson have in the tank at this point, too? I mean, he's been in the league now. This will be 12 years for him, and he's really not the same quarterback that he used to be. The mobility is not there to the same level that it was when he nearly won back-to-back Super Bowls with the Seahawks, and even late 20 teens. The year where he hurt his finger is last year in Seattle. Even before that, you started to see the signs, I think, that Wilson is on the back end of his career. And I mean, while the numbers did take a little bit of an increase with a better coach and a better offensive system and better weapons this past year, he's still very lacking. So, I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers could be a viable option. They don't really have much else going for them at quarterback. And then there's the news that Adam Schefter reports today that he had a kind of secret, not so secret meeting in New Jersey with the New York Giants, who have their whole Daniel Jones situation, also have a decent draft pick this year, and a quarterback class that has some, upstart talent, but also some questions, particularly with Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy behind the overwhelming favorite in Caleb Williams. Tim couldn't be here today. He said, quote, in regards to Russell Wilson, I am all for this. I firmly believe unless we draft a top-tier talent, Daniel Jones is our guy. However, Russ is without a doubt an upgrade. I feel that he can still play football to a great level, and what we saw the past 2 seasons is not the Russ we know. So that's the take from one Giant fan. Rahill, you're another. Would you entertain the idea of Russell Wilson? Or, I mean, is this also just a moot point because are the Steelers probably the landing spot for him?
I mean, I would still bet that the Steelers are the landing point, but I mean, similar to Tim, I wouldn't mind seeing Russell Wilson in New York. And then for the main reason is you're going to really get away with paying him a dirt cheap amount because he's already making $39 million from the Broncos. They're already eating all his cap. So you can go out and sign Russell Wilson on a 1-year, deal that's maybe like $5 to $8 million. And I mean, as I think all New York fans would say, maybe even if they're not the biggest proponent of Russell Wilson, would you take him on the roster to maybe give a little quarterback competition to Daniel Jones? Because Russell Wilson, yes, is he the same quarterback as he was in Seattle all those years ago? No, he's not at the same level. As you said, Eddie, the mobility has moved down, but I still believe he is a solid starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he's a quarterback that can easily start. He's now maybe more in a kind of game manager kind of role where, you play with solid defense, and then if you need him to make off-script plays when he can. So I still do think he's got some decent to good football left in the tank. He's obviously not going to be the all-pro, but I think he's got good football left in the tank. And if you want to bring him in for 1 year, give Daniel Jones some QB competition, maybe the competition brings out the better in Daniel Jones, or maybe not, and Russell Wilson's your bridge starter to a future QB. Or if you're completely done with Daniel Jones at this point and you want to draft a quarterback, why don't you sign Russell Wilson for 1 to 2 years and have the quarterback sit behind him and learn from Russell Wilson? I mean, if Wilson ends up playing well and plays himself into maybe a new deal, maybe that's a good thing, but maybe that's an option. So there's a lot of different ways they can go with this move. So again, I'm not avidly against bringing in Russell Wilson. I don't mind if he was the starting quarterback. If he wins the job over Daniel Jones, I think he is a significant upgrade. So we'll see. But yeah, similar to Tim, I don't mind them bringing in Russell Wilson.
And again, I think this is a point that I'm going to circle back to that I said all the way back last year. The quarterback market has not reached a level where every competent QB needs to be paid $40 million. And this is yet another example of that. Russell Wilson, of course, a lot of the pay is because of what he's done in his past. But you look at Daniel Jones, too. $40 million on that contract. And Giants fans are thinking about drafting someone to replace him. Deshaun Watson gets that lucrative deal. And regardless of how you feel about Deshaun Watson as a person, as a player, frankly, Joe Flacco elevated that team to another level when Watson was out, and he's making all this guaranteed money. It's just insane that the quarterback market reached this point and everybody's demanding these lucrative figures. The quarterbacks who should be paid lucratively are quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes because they demand that because they actually perform like that on the field. The others do not. And Russell Wilson, maybe there's still more from him in the tank. I disagree with Tim that, that's not the Russ we know over the last 2 years. He's getting much older, but I do agree with him on one point. Russell Wilson or Daniel Jones, if I have my pick, I'd go Russ at this point, especially with Daniel Jones's injury history, because Russell Wilson, frankly, has stayed pretty healthy throughout his NFL career, and he's durable. And maybe a situation change would work out for him, but I have my doubts. But if you had to pick between Wilson, Jones, and potentially drafting JJ McCarthy, I agree that Russ is probably the best option there of the three. Now, the other Giants situation, Rahill, I wanted to touch on is the running back room. Suddenly, running back free agency over the next couple of months is going to be a really interesting deal because a lot of RBs did not get franchise tagged, and now they will be free agents. Austin Eckler is now on the market. Tony Pollard's on the market, and Saquon Barkley, after getting tagged once, does not get tagged once again, and now he is available as well. So looking ahead to where the Giants go from here at the running back position, and Saquon Barkley as a whole, we know the running back market has completely fallen off these last few years because teams don't see them as very durable long-term investments, and they'll go with someone for a few years and quickly pivot to someone else. Dalvin Cook, in the matter of 1 year, went from a top 5 running back to a spare bench piece that barely plays without much of a diminishment in his abilities. He frankly just aged out of the position. And now we look at guys like Saquon and Tony Pollard and Austin Eckler, who've been good the last 5-6 years. Suddenly they're seeming old. And let's not forget about King Henry, who's clearly done as a Tennessee Titan. I don't know how done he is in general in the NFL, especially as a starting running back. So where do you see the running back market going from here? Do any of these guys really get paid and really get approached by several teams?
As far as Tony Pollard, I don't think so. I think Tony Pollard he's had a few injuries. I think he's toward the back. I don't think he'll get paid much. Derrick Henry, I love, but I don't think he'll get paid much either, just because he's older for a running back. But who knows? Maybe he'll find a way. As far as Saquon goes, I think he definitely has a very good chance at getting a very good deal. I still do believe Saquon has got 2 to 3 very good all-pro years left in him. The only issues is, the health, and that's how it is. He's missed a few games here and there. Outside of his seasons where he's gotten hurt, and he's missed, 9 where he had the ACL tear, but he's been pretty good. So as far as the market goes as a whole, I don't see much change. These guys are, I know these guys are looking for what, 15 to $20 million per year. That's just not going to happen. I see Saquon Barkley max getting 12. If I'm an NFL franchise, I'm not paying Saquon Barkley more than $12 million a year. I'm signing him to a 3-year, $36 million deal, something like that. I'm not going anywhere above that. And a prime example of that is, look at the Cowboys. They gave Zeke all that money, and they couldn't wait to get him out of there. I mean, even Alvin Kamara, look how much money he's making in New Orleans. He's not really lived up to it because he's been in and out. He's been hurt, and the Saints always find themselves over the cap limit. But those are kind of just deals that you look at, that NFL teams are going to look at and be like, why would we put ourselves in that situation? And it's just unfortunate the way the position goes, but it's how it is because, I don't know how much Christian McCaffrey is going to get paid, but if they were getting paid what they deserve, McCaffrey would be getting well over $20 million, but because he's a running back, that's just not feasible.
And as problematic as both the quarterback and running back markets are right now that we just had this dialogue, it pales in comparison, frankly, to what's happening in Major League Baseball. So we're into the month of March, and we still have a situation where I know there's been a few more roster moves. Cody Bellinger gets his contract. Blake Snell, NL Cy Young winner from a year ago, is not on a team. Jordan Montgomery, one of the better pitchers in the postseason last year, who's proved his worth over the last couple of seasons, not on a team. And those are 2 of several that are still not rostered. And we're sitting here on March 8th, and the Dodgers and Padres kick off that series in Japan in 12 days. overall opening day for everybody else is less than 3 weeks away. And you have premier players who are not signed because Scott Boras and the other major players in agency, particularly Scott Boras and the Boras Corporation, control the market and have way too much power. And it's created this weird situation where the free agency world is kind of broken in baseball. And I mean, I worry about this from a player health standpoint as well. Because I know these guys are staying ready when they're not at spring training, but baseball, particularly for pitchers who are so fragile, requires that ramp up period. And you're missing out on that, I feel like, for these players when they're not there in spring training. I know they're still working out. I know they're still throwing separately, but they're not getting that live game everyday action that they would be if they were signed to a team. And I wonder, what will it take? Will it take a high caliber player not signing a contract and then immediately getting injured because they get forced in and they don't get to play in spring training, or not being ready for opening day because they've been sitting there unsigned all winter, for this to change? Because the winter meetings clearly don't matter anymore, because it's just occasionally there's a trade and then these young players get signed to 15-year contracts. And then when there's other free agents, they get forgotten about and tossed aside until after spring training starts. Think about how weird that is compared to any other sport. You have marquee guys who are still sitting in their houses when everybody's reported to camp, and you have games going on in the preseason. That does not happen in any other sport, and it's just gotten progressively worse and worse over the last couple of years. And it's again a situation where I feel like the agents have way too much control over what's happening in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, the whole market for the baseball is a complete mess. I mean, even not just the pitcher market or anything, just the market in general is a complete, like, you see the way the Dodgers were able to structure Otani's deal and stuff like. I mean, it's a complete mess everywhere you look. And I mean, health is obviously the thing that kind of, worries you the most, because you talk about it, Eddie. I mean, you look at when, even in the COVID season, when spring training got shortened, they had to cancel a lot of games. It was tough at the start of the season. A lot of players, even though it was only 60 games, a lot of players still got hurt because they didn't have the ramp up. And you talk about with the MLB, especially with pitchers, I like a Blake Snell or any other starting pitchers. I mean, if you are not consistently getting ramped up, you're constantly throwing almost cold turkey, and that just leads to more injuries, especially in the shoulder. And the issue is, when you're not on a roster, you can't really ramp up when you're not on a team. Yeah, you can throw and you can practice, but that is nowhere near getting the reps you need. It was almost like in the NFL. Remember when COVID canceled the preseason and we saw a bunch of players go down in the first few weeks? That was because, as much as we dog on the preseason, they were still getting somewhat relatively live game reps that were able to, kind of get themselves back into shape. You go in there cold turkey all of a sudden in a lot of sports. I mean, injury is destined to happen. So I don't know. I hope the market can somehow find a way to fix itself, but it doesn't look like there's any solution or anything that's going to fix it coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. We're a couple of weeks away. We will have our full Major League Baseball season preview coming up in the very near future, so you can stay tuned for that. I want to circle back to football for one more topic I forgot to touch on: the retirement of an Eagles legend, Jason Kelce. And I know he's an offensive lineman, and people say, oh, well, he was 13 years in the NFL. He was getting older. He was still at the top of his game. He retires as top five center easily in the league, arguably the best. And the tush push does not work without Jason Kelce. For the people who want that play eradicated, I think it's now going to happen, because I don't really see the Eagles being able to do that with Cam Jurgens. Jason Kelce being able to power up the middle was what set up Jalen Hurts for many of those scores, and to be able to drive the pile forwards to get first downs or get touchdowns. So no Jason Kelce is a massive loss for the Eagles. Kelce, I know he had a couple of bad penalties in games this season. He also then made up for it and essentially won the game for the Eagles against the Bills back in November, when he had the huge block off the edge to create the lane for Jalen Hurts to rush in to score. So huge loss for the city of Philadelphia and the Eagles. Jason Kelce, of course, such an important piece to that team, going all the way back to their Super Bowl victory 5-6 years ago. As an Eagles fan, he will certainly be missed. And I think this is going to be a real challenge for them going forwards, trying to figure out how they piece together this offensive line. And again, Eagles have a ton of free agents. Philadelphia and Baltimore are two teams that lost a lot and are going to have to replenish. And those are two teams, Rahill, I really look at both in the draft and over the next couple months in free agency that are going to have a lot of work to do if they want to come anywhere close to the success of the past year, which wasn't all that successful because as good as both those teams were in the regular season, they folded in the playoffs.
Yeah. The Eagles have got to figure out what they want to do in that offensive line because it went from the best offensive line the year they made the Super Bowl to one of their liabilities down the stretch when they were getting absolutely after they started 10-1 and they completely folded down the stretch. The main reason was the offensive line just wasn't there. You looked at the offense and they couldn't run set plays. Now, whether Jalen Hurts was dealing with a little bit of a knee issue, we maybe there's something to do with that, but it just didn't look like the running lanes were there for Hurts to take off with it. And that was a huge element to the Eagles offense, which is why they were so good the year they made the Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden last year, why their offense fell stagnant. And you talk about it, I mean, they got a lot of things to figure out. I don't know what all of a sudden I'm seeing AJ Brown trade packages. I don't think that's going to happen. But as far as Jason Kelce goes, I mean, yeah, he was the heart and soul of that Philadelphia Eagles team, that locker room. So they got to figure out who's going to be that kind of next leader. I assume it will be Jalen Hurts. But I think it was mainly just due to, I guess the documentary really gave a good insight into maybe why he wanted to retire. In that he was dealing with a lot of injuries, and even though he was at the top of his game, the pain was a lot. He was going through a lot of pain night in and night out, just in general. So yeah, it's a real loss for the city of Philadelphia, and the Eagles have got to figure out what they're going to do to try and piece themselves back together because they got to make some significant movements on both really on the offensive side. Got to figure out how to get that run game back to what it was the year they made the Super Bowl.
Yeah, all I know is Jason Kelsey's getting himself a TV contract very, very
Oh,
soon.
definitely, definitely. If
100%.
Andrew Whitworth got one, he's gonna get one.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go to the NBA. We got a month left before the postseason, and I think it's worth now with the deadline passed, and we've seen how some of these trades have culminated after a trade deadline that frankly wasn't all that active, who the contenders and the pretenders truly are in each conference. Let's start with the East. I think the East is a little easier to pick out. Of course, everybody's going to be chasing the Boston Celtics, who have had some games where they've been a little off, but frankly, that starting five is elite this year with the additions of Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, along with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who guided that group to an NBA Finals appearance 2 years ago. It's really going to be hard for a team to stop the Celtics, especially when you look at who the other options are. The Knicks, as good as they are, and I give them the credit, that's a great roster they've built. I like the trades they've made. They're not healthy, and it's going to be really hard to piece that together. Anunoby daps up Frank the Tank, and his elbow's been messed up ever since. Julius Randle has been hurt. Jalen Brunson with the injury scare against the Cavs. It's just hard for them to put everything together right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Then you go to Philadelphia. Of course, Joel Embiid is out. That team is a borderline play-in group without Joel Embiid. You got Milwaukee, who definitely have the roster to do it. Question is, do they have the coach? And right now, my answer is no with Doc Rivers in postseason situations. Miami has taken a step back, I think, from what we've seen from them over the last couple of years. And Indiana and Cleveland, they're both there. They're both in the mix, but I still think there is still time necessary for those teams before they become true contenders. We still see that in the NBA with young teams. It usually takes a playoff appearance or two for a young group before they can really establish themselves and go on a run. Cleveland made the playoffs last year. I think they can definitely win around this season. I don't know much more than that. Indiana, I know they made it to the finals in the in-season tournament. I don't really know how much further they can go despite the talent they have with Halliburton and the rest of that group. But I really think Boston is the number one contender. I would not count out the Bucks, the Knicks, or the Heat because of what Miami's done in the past, because of Milwaukee's roster, and because of the Knicks roster and Tom Thibodeau's defensive mindset. But everybody is clearly chasing the Celtics, and that has not changed since the beginning of the year.
And yeah, it's gonna be a matter of fact if someone can catch the Celtics in the East. Now, Miami got him last year. They did, and they've got so maybe that option. But I think clearly the most likely who's got the best chance of doing it is Milwaukee. I still think even with Doc Rivers now, we have to give him credit. Since the All-Star break, they have looked a lot better. But they did just get beat by 35 against Golden State. But outside of that, they've looked a lot better since the All-Star break. So we do have to give them that credit. It's not as if they're still completely, you know, flundering like they first were. So from that aspect, yeah, but yeah, it's going to be who can beat Boston. And to me, right now, no one in that East can beat Boston. It's got to be someone in the finals that can do it. I know we're about to talk about the Western Conference, but to me, the only team that can beat them, it's Denver. I think I know Boston has the best record, but to me, I still don't know how. I still feel like Denver's being underrated to defend their title. They're still so good. Nobody has an answer for how to guard Jokic. The only way to guard him is let him score. I mean, I've never heard that for any player, but even still, he'll find a way to get his teammates involved. So for me, the clear-cut favorite for the NBA Finals right now, it's the Denver Nuggets, like it should have been really the whole season. I know OKC and Minnesota have got nice things going with 1 and 2, but now no Karl Anthony Towns for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Thunder are still very young. They haven't been they got kind of the experience last year when they were close to the play-ins, but they are still very young. So I'd still trust a Denver Nuggets team to take them out if they get in a second round matchup. So to me right now, the top team in the NBA is the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you about the Nuggets, especially when you still consider Jamal Murray, who, for whatever reason, he's sometimes non-existent in meaningless regular season games. But
And he
when the
comes
lights
alive.
are bright, he's the good game merchant. Yeah, he is sensational. He becomes a top 15 player in the NBA during the playoffs. And he's not like that in the regular season, but he is. And then you've got Jokic, who's the best player in the league. And like you said, he's unstoppable. There's really no way that teams can figure him out. But I do think there are a couple of teams that could at least make noise in the West and make things interesting with Denver. And again, it's a long postseason, and we've seen injuries happen. And if something happens to the Nuggets, they lose a key piece, there's still the possibility that a team can surprise them. And to me, the teams that can do that, I like the Clippers, the way they've put things together this season. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, all it took was a rule change from Adam Silver. Now they're out there every game and they're playing great. James Harden has actually complemented that group pretty well. It's been a good balance, even with Russell Westbrook. I thought that was a really problematic move at first, but as Harden and Westbrook, I think, have both come to the realization that they're on the back end of their careers, they are not the same talents that they used to be. They've adapted their roles and are complementing Leonard and George, who are still really, really good at a very high level. So I like the Clippers. I think that's a team that can really make some noise, and maybe this is the season they can finally reach the conference finals. I have many doubts about the Wolves. I don't care if they're the number 1 seed right now. Even if Karl Anthony Towns was healthy, I don't care if Anthony Edwards is jumping 20 feet in the air to block a ball and slamming his head against the rim. You got Rudy Gobert. I don't trust Rudy Gobert in a playoff situation, especially with the blow-up we saw last year in the play-in. And that team just does not have a lot of depth, frankly. So I don't know about them. OKC, I really like to believe in them, but I also know, besides the play-in last year, these guys have no playoff experience whatsoever. So I think the Thunder could win a round. Maybe they make it to the conference finals and surprise, but they're a team that could definitely get surprised themselves by a team that's more senior than them. And let's not forget, yeah, you got the Kings, who I think people are forgetting to talk about. And then you still got 4 teams with future Hall of Famers in Dallas, Phoenix, Golden State, and the Lakers, who are all problematic in different ways, but they're all going to be in the playoffs in some form. I still think the Lakers, again, everybody doubted the Lakers going to the playoffs last year, and what do? They make it to the conference finals. If LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthy, that team, I think, has the second or third highest ceiling in the entire conference, without a doubt. Dallas, I still have my doubts about, and I have a lot of questions about Jason Kidd as a coach, just like I do with Doc Rivers. Phoenix, I know that group hasn't really synergized perfectly, but Nurkic has had a good year. Durant and Booker, that combination is working. Bradley Beal, of course, has not really worked out with them, but I still don't doubt Phoenix. Golden State, I think, is too old. I think they're kind of done. But I like the Lakers, the Clippers, and OKC as all teams that could potentially contend against Denver. But Raheel, I do agree with you. I think the Nuggets are the team to beat, and Nuggets Celtics is probably the two top contenders for the championship.
Yeah, I think they're the most safe. My only concern with the Lakers is just I still like that's team they're still so iffy when it comes to defense because some games they'll play defense and some games they won't want to do anything because listen, I still think LeBron James is still very good defensively. Anthony Davis is also very good defensively, but there are just games where you look and they're just completely and they're doing nothing. And the only reason I say I am kind of, not as high on the Lakers is I mean, they got swept by the Nuggets. They're 0-8 in their last 8 games against the Nuggets. They haven't been successful really against the Kings either. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm sorry with Phoenix, I just don't really have much belief in Devin Booker and those boys staying healthy. It's unfortunate, but the trend throughout their career is every time Devin Booker gets it going, all of a sudden pulls a hamstring or something like that. So there's just too many question marks for me with Phoenix. But I can always be sold on and solid with Denver, and that's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Again, just over a month until the play-in tournament, and then we go from there, the NBA postseason starting in mid-April. Well, that'll be it for this episode of Sports Speak Live, episode 166. Find us on the web at sports-speak.com. Again, we're powered by SeatGeek, promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first online purchase. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, a couple of big episodes. We'll have our March Madness special after Selection Sunday. We'll dive into the bracket and give our best picks there. We'll also preview the 2024 Major League Baseball season in just a couple weeks' time. We'll have Tim back next week as well. Thank you to Rahill Jaiswal for filling in for Tim. Until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off here of Sports Speak Live. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you later this month.